Under the bright lights of Kyiv's presidential hall, President Volodymyr Zelensky steps up to the podium, his expression solemn, his words deliberate. He begins with a plea that immediately captures global attention, a direct call to Donald Trump, the US president who once brokered peace in the Middle East. Just as you ended the war in Gaza, Zelensky says, help us end the war in Ukraine. For months, Ukraine's leader has sought a path to peace amid relentless bombardments and mounting exhaustion. Now, in a moment charged with both urgency and symbolism, he looks toward Washington once more, to a man known as much for his unpredictability as for his appetite for deal-making. The appeal comes just a day after one of the largest Russian attacks on Ukraine's energy grid this year. Missiles and drones rained down on Kyiv and nearby regions, plunging hundreds of thousands into darkness. Among the casualties was a 7-year-old boy, killed when debris struck his family's home. For many Ukrainians, this latest tragedy underscores the same grim truth, that every diplomatic delay is measured in lives lost and cities scarred. Zelensky describes his phone conversation with Trump as positive and productive. Officials in Kyiv say the tone was warmer than previous exchanges, suggesting a subtle but significant shift in relations. Since returning to power in January, Trump has made it no secret that he wants to end the war quickly, describing it as, quote, a conflict that never should have happened. But despite months of outreach, mediation and meetings with European allies, the path to peace in Eastern Europe remains deeply uncertain. Trump's foreign policy team often frames his approach under the banner of peace through strength. It is a doctrine built on personal relationships, high-stakes theatrics, and a belief that diplomacy works best when leaders talk directly. It was that same philosophy that produced the ceasefire deal in Gaza, an agreement still holding, however fragile, after months of US pressure, Egyptian mediation and global attention. Now, Zelensky is trying to harness that same spotlight for Ukraine. He knows that global focus has drifted, that headlines once filled with Ukraine's struggle have been replaced by Gaza's devastation. By linking the two conflicts in a single appeal, he reclaims a piece of the narrative that had slipped away. In Washington, Trump's aides confirm that the call lasted just under 20 minutes. A senior White House official describes it as direct, businesslike, and emotionally charged. The Ukrainian president reportedly thanked Trump for what he called renewed American engagement and invited him to send a special envoy to join ongoing peace discussions in Geneva. Behind the formality, however, lies a complex political equation. Trump's relationship with Vladimir Putin remains both an asset and a liability. Only 2 months ago, the two men met in Anchorage, Alaska, a gesture aimed at lowering tensions, but one that yielded no breakthrough. Sources close to the talks said Putin rejected every proposal for a ceasefire, insisting that Russia's military objectives had not yet been achieved. That stalemate has left Trump in a delicate position, eager to showcase his diplomatic skill, yet wary of appearing too accommodating to Moscow. In recent weeks, his rhetoric has hardened. After months of suggesting that Ukraine might have to surrender some territory, Trump now insists that Kyiv can recover all its land with NATO and EU support. For many analysts, the reversal reflects a growing realization that compromise with Putin may be impossible without credible deterrence. Zelensky, for his part, welcomes the tougher tone. Advisors in Kyiv describe the US shift as a critical moral signal. They believe that Trump's endorsement of full territorial restoration strengthens Ukraine's negotiating hand ahead of any future ceasefire talks. But they also know the risks, that the same unpredictability that makes Trump a potential peacemaker could just as easily unravel delicate diplomacy. In Kyiv, the domestic mood is conflicted. On one hand, there is gratitude for continued Western backing. On the other, fatigue from a war that has consumed nearly 4 years of national life. Every blackout, every funeral, every empty classroom erodes public morale. And yet, there is still resilience, a determination that borders on defiance. As one local journalist put it this week, even in the dark, we refuse to surrender our dignity. Across Ukraine, generators hum outside hospitals and shelters. Volunteers distribute blankets, bread, and phone chargers. Children study by candlelight as parents listen to radio updates about the Trump-Zelensky call. For many, the mere mention of peace, however distant, feels like a lifeline. Let him try, one mother tells a reporter. If he can stop the bombing, we just want silence. In Washington, the symbolism is hard to miss. For Trump, whose political brand thrives on grand deals and televised victories, a Ukrainian peace initiative could become his next global stage. It would cement his image as a peacemaker who ended not one, but two wars. Yet behind the optics lies a stark reality. Ukraine is not Gaza. Its adversary is not a militia, but a nuclear-armed state entrenched in occupied territories and backed by decades of grievance. Diplomats in Brussels caution that any deal must be more than a photo opportunity. European leaders remember the Minsk Accords, celebrated with fanfare, then broken by bombs. This time, they say, the world cannot afford another illusion of peace. Still, some hope persists. A draft framework circulating among Western diplomats outlines a frontline freeze, verified by international monitors, coupled with reconstruction funds overseen by the World Bank. It would not end the war outright, but could create space for broader negotiations. Zelensky is said to be open to such ideas, provided that no Ukrainian sovereignty is compromised. The Kremlin, unsurprisingly, has dismissed all of it as propaganda. Moscow's foreign ministry accuses Kyiv of performing for Western cameras, while Russian state media derides Trump's mediation as American theatre. But in war, perception matters. And tonight, the image of Ukraine's president publicly appealing to the White House resonates far beyond politics. For Zelensky, this is not merely diplomacy. It is survival. He understands that wars are won not just on battlefields, but in boardrooms, in press conferences, and on the global stage of perception. By invoking Trump's Gaza success, he transforms his country's plea into part of a broader global narrative, one that connects suffering across continents under a single call for peace. In his evening address, Zelensky speaks to the nation once again. He thanks rescue workers, mourns the dead, and vows to restore power to every home. Then his tone softens. We know peace is possible, he says, because we have seen it elsewhere. But peace will not come to those who wait, only to those who act. Those words capture both his frustration and his faith. Frustration at a world distracted by other crises, faith that diplomacy, if revived, can still rewrite this story. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, Trump's administration maintains cautious optimism. White House officials tell reporters that preparatory discussions are underway for potential talks involving Ukrainian, Russian, and European envoys. No dates, no details, just the suggestion that Washington is once again willing to play mediator. In Europe, reactions are mixed. French President Emmanuel Macron publicly welcomes renewed US involvement, calling it a sign of revived transatlantic leadership. Germany's Chancellor is more reserved, warning that any negotiation must not come at the expense of justice. Within NATO, planners quietly discuss what a post-war security arrangement might look like, one that keeps Ukraine safe without provoking Moscow into further escalation. On the streets of Kyiv, the conversation is simpler. People want to know if this call means fewer air raid alarms, fewer funerals, and maybe one day, normal life again. Their hopes are modest: working lights, quiet nights, children who can sleep without fear. The human cost of this war is staggering. Tens of thousands dead, millions displaced, entire regions reduced to rubble. Yet amid the ruins, Ukrainians continue to rebuild. They plant gardens in bombed courtyards, reopen schools under tarpaulin roofs, and marry in shelters. Life persists, stubborn and defiant. For journalists covering the story, it is this resilience, not the geopolitics, that defines Ukraine's character. Peace efforts come and go, leaders change, headlines fade, but the spirit that keeps people going under bombardment remains the same. As winter approaches, the urgency grows. Temperatures drop, energy shortages worsen, and the spectre of a fifth wartime winter looms large. If diplomacy fails again, humanitarian agencies warn of catastrophic consequences. That is why Zelensky's appeal carries such weight. It is not only a message to Trump, but a warning to the world. Do not look away. Whether Trump can truly deliver peace here remains to be seen. His admirers point to his success in Gaza as proof of his unconventional diplomacy. His critics see it as coincidence rather than craft. Either way, his involvement reshapes the conversation. Where once Ukraine's war seemed locked in endless stalemate, there is now at least a flicker of renewed momentum. In Washington's corridors of power, aides debate strategy while cameras linger on familiar imagery, flags, handshakes, and smiling leaders. Each gesture is calculated, every word rehearsed, but somewhere behind the scenes, real decisions are being weighed: how far to go, what to risk, and who will bear the cost. Back in Kyiv, night falls again. The skyline glows faintly under emergency lights. Sirens wail in the distance, then fade into silence. People light candles, whisper prayers, and wait. They know that one phone call cannot end a war, but it can perhaps begin to change its direction. Zelensky's message tonight is as much about faith as politics. Faith that peace can be engineered through persistence. Faith that even the most unlikely of mediators can help turn the tide. He is not asking for miracles, only momentum. And if that momentum comes from Washington, he is willing to embrace it. This is not just a war for territory, the narrator concludes. It is a war for attention, for empathy, for the right to remain in the world's conscience. And in that struggle, Zelensky has scored at least one small victory. The world is listening again. The camera fades on the Ukrainian flag, illuminated against the night. Its fabric flutters gently in the winter wind, a reminder that even in the darkest hours, the idea of peace still survives. The voice of the journalist softens to a close. In a time when diplomacy feels fragile and hope feels rare, one plea cuts through the noise. A call from Kyiv to Washington, from a nation under fire to a leader who claims to end wars. Whether history remembers it as another speech or the start of something greater will depend on what follows next. For now, the words hang in the air. Just as you did in Gaza, help us end this war.